It's great to see you. This is actually pretty cool from this end. I wish you could be sitting here. Listen, thank you for taking your time to join us. Those of you who haven't had a chance to meet Betty yet, I'm sorry. You've been cheated out of something special in life. But my wife Betty's here with us today. We got some other folks in the back of the room here who are staring at us and correcting all of our answers, I'm sure. You may hear them yelling at me or throwing things over the top of this camera at some point. But we're here today just to see what's on your mind. Let me make a couple of very short comments at the beginning. The last couple of years have been pretty tough on a whole lot of people in our Air Force. We've been through furlough for our civilian workforce. We've been debating the sequestration stuff. Ops tempo has increased like it has for all the services when we thought it was going to be decreasing. And the bottom line is we've been distracted for a while here. And then on top of it all, we threw this ridiculously ugly force shaping stuff because we had to get down to a size force that we could afford to train and operate by this next fiscal year 16, because we're not going to have enough money to operate the size of the force that we had before. And so that's why we had to do this stuff so quickly and so dramatically, and it was horrible. It was awful. Everybody knows that. But I think we're at kind of an opportunity point for our Air Force now because that's behind us. The sequestration stuff is understood now. The resources will be lower, but we know how to deal with that. We're about to get a report from the Commission on Pay and Compensation that covers everything from military pay to retirement planning to commissary and BXs. And we'll see their recommendations here, which is going to be a comprehensive package of things that includes other things like health care and tuition assistance and all those things. Within the next 2 weeks, that'll be released. We'll look at it. We have to respond within a month to the White House on whether we agree or disagree with the recommendations. And so while the big Department of Defense effort is going on here in DC to put that view together, we're going to be sharing information with you guys so you can see specifically what these recommendations mean to you. The new retirement plan would mean for a tech sergeant who leaves at 14 years, what does it mean? For a master who leaves at 20 years, what does it mean? So you can see specifically what the recommendations will do to you and to your family in terms of pay, retired pay, all those kind of things. And so trust us a little bit to get that to you in the next few weeks, but trust us on one other thing, guys. Nobody's going to screw you on your pay, on your retirement, on your benefits. It's just not going to happen. Congress isn't going to let it happen. The Department of Defense isn't going to let it happen. The Joint Chiefs aren't going to let it happen. The Secretary and I aren't going to let it happen. Your commanders aren't going to sit quietly by it and get screwed along with you. I'll tell you what, if it comes to pay, compensation, family benefits, this lady sitting right here ain't going to let it happen. I guarantee you she'll remind me of the impact every single day. And so I think there's an opportunity for us as we're getting through the discussion on this stuff to use the rest of this year to refocus on kind of our core job and get back to doing the mission. Don't be too distracted. Most of our Air Force is now past all this stuff. Sequestration is not going to directly affect most of you at all from here forward. We've made the adjustment. Your unit will be operating. The mission won't change. You're going to have money to train. If that changes, I'll tell you, I promise. The other thing that's going to happen is force shaping stuff is behind us, and that axe that's kind of hanging over so many people isn't there anymore. The people who are leaving the Air Force, we need to do everything we can to help make their transition as easy as possible. The rest of us need to look forward, and let's go forward together now. We believe we're at as low as we can get as far as numbers of people in the active Air Force. The Secretary and I both believe that. You're going to hear that in congressional testimony this year. It's factored into our planning for programs and budgeting for the next 5 years. We do not want to get any smaller. Even if we move hardware out and put it into the Guard or Reserve and start to grow the Guard and Reserve a little bit, which I think we should, we're going to not go any lower on the active duty side because we're just becoming too small to succeed. And it's showing up in not enough manpower on flight lines or in back shops or in cop squadrons, all the things that you're dealing with. We have got to start thinking about fixing now and resetting our Air Force with this focus on doing the job better in the future. So that's what 2015 is going to be for me. It's about getting back to focusing on the fight, making sure we make squadrons healthy, and getting the resources lined up so over time we're funding those things that make the most difference in those areas. Okay, so I'm going to shut up there, see if Betty would like to make any opening comments in terms of saying hi, and then we'll get to your questions. Thanks for joining us today. By the way, anything you want to ask about, the two of us will answer. There's no rules here today other than don't BS me and I won't BS you, okay? Betty, any comments?
No. Hello. Thank you for having us today. We're very excited to be here. Happy 2015. Makes it sound like things are going to settle down, hopefully, and go well. And I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you and answering any questions that we can. So thanks for being here with us.
Okay, where are we starting here? Al Udid, okay. Question from Al Udid.
Good evening, General Welsh, and this is Welsh from Al Udid. I'm Sergeant Russ from the 379th Maintenance Group, and my question for you is, with the new EPR system, a lot of people have questions with static closeout dates and the new force distribution and how that's going to work. One of the questions I have is for people that are selected to specific sections, such as quality assurance or training or UDMs that are not special duties. How are they going to fall into the force distribution system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Let me start with a couple of comments on why we're doing this, because it's important to understand why this is even happening. Right now in the Air Force, under our current promotion system, your EPR makes about a 1% difference in your promotability all the way up through Senior Master Sergeant. I haven't found anybody in the Air Force yet who thinks that's good. So job performance basically means nothing. It's all about other weighted criteria. So the day Chief Cody came on the job, I said, Chief, here's the facts. The fact is that a really, really, really phenomenal tech sergeant will get promoted to Master Sergeant exactly the same time as a really, really, really average tech sergeant. And in an organization whose job is to perform and to accomplish the work of winning the nation's wars, that's not an acceptable way to measure who ought to be promoted. It doesn't mean we have people who've been promoted who didn't deserve it. It just means there are people who deserve to move forward quicker so we can make them senior NCOs earlier and use them longer to help lead our Air Force. So that's the basic premise. Now, if you're going to try and do that, you got to do something in the old system. Because in the old system, if I put you, Sergeant Ross, into a new squadron and there were 10 tech sergeants in that squadron, by the end of the first day, you could tell me who the top 3 were. And by the end of the second day, you could tell me who the bottom 3 were. And by the end of the first week, you could line them up 1 through 10. And everybody in the squadron kind of knew the order. And then they'd all get a 5 on their EPR. We're screwing our top people because we're hiding them in the mix. And so the second part of this is if you're going to do something like put in a Master Sergeant promotion board, as opposed to following just a pure WAP scoring technique, so you can promote Master Sergeants sooner, if they really deserve it as a high-performing tech sergeant, you have to have a way of separating NCOs over time. You've got to have a way of knowing who those top 3 are. And that's what the new EPR form is intended to do. The reason for stratification is because you may have an office where everybody is a really strong performer. And under the current form, you give them all a 5. Under the new form, there's still going to be a series of blocks. There'll be words instead of numbers on them. But you can still give all those people you consider really exceptional performers a top block for performance to recognize their performance. But when it comes time for a promotion board, as a senior rater, your senior commander, your wing commander, it depends on how many people you got in the organization as to where this will move up to aggregate. But somebody is going to have to stratify those performers in that squadron. So those 10 tech sergeants competing for master won't all look the same. They can't all be number 1 of 10. Because the promotion board needs help from the people who know from supervising these people that these are my top 1, 2, and 3. The rest of them are good performers doing strong work, but they're not my first choice for promotion. That's the intent of the form. The details are going to be released here over the next couple of months as these forms take effect. If you're not getting enough information on that, we can flood the market more. Putting it all out at the beginning is probably a little bit overkill because people will forget. We've proven that to ourselves in force shaping and other things. And they forget to go where to go look for information. So we're trying to meter it out in a way so you get it before you need it and have time to ask questions and understand it. But that's the whole concept behind the thing. I actually think you'll find this will work. This has been worked on for the last 2 years now by all the command chief master sergeants from the different major commands led by Chief Cody. Our A1 team, AFBC teams have been part of this. I'm excited about it, and I think we'll find that our best performers will start to be promoted sooner. And if that happens, it's a good thing.
It's a good range time, sir.
Ramstein.
Hello, sir. I'm Senior Airman Nick from the 1st Aerospace Communications Operations Squadron, and I had a question about your opinion on the difference between this sequestration and our innovation. Because in the State of the Air Force address, you had mentioned how with a lot of the consolidations in Mildenhall and such, that we're not losing any capabilities. So if it seems like if some of this stuff is done before, it's spectacular innovation, but whenever these budget cuts happen or things start shifting, it's done out of a necessity, and it seems like we're doing things because we have to. How do you sort of define the difference between this innovation or sequestration?
Sequestration has been given to us as a law. Innovation is something we choose to do or not to do as an institution. I think that there are places in the Air Force where we have been using innovation to make ourselves better at the mission, to become more efficient, to save money, to ease people's schedules all the time. There are places in the Air Force that are remarkable examples of this. But as an institution, we never fully embraced it, empowered it, rewarded it, expected it, to the point where we have a whole lot of people in our Air Force, I'm not sure if you're one of them, but I know a lot of them and have talked to a lot of them, who don't feel like they can come forward with a good idea in their workplace because they don't think anybody is interested in listening to them. They don't think that their innovative idea will even be fully considered, much less ever implemented, because they're worried that their bosses don't want to take the risk or don't want to take the time or don't want to rock the boat enough to try something new and different. If that's the case in your workplace, we have to change it. If that's the case as an Air Force, we have to change it. And so one of the things that big institutions have to do is you have to institutionalize thinking and process that drives constant change. We don't have right now in the Air Force a place that is responsible for innovation. We don't have a place that drives a strategic discussion each year on how do we reward innovation on a large scale. And we don't have, because of that, anything that drives discussion at the MAGCOM, the wing, and down to the squadron level of why is innovation important, why does it make a difference in our job, and how am I going to reward you because you've got a great idea that really makes a difference. We've had intermittent programs over time. The IDEA program, AFSO 21 was a program that tried to develop this, but we never fully resourced it. We have Every Dollar Counts going on now. But the Every Dollar Counts program actually highlights the problem I'm talking about. Last year when we put it online for 30 days and said, give us ideas on how we can be innovative and save money, we got 17,000 ideas. To about 60% of those, we sent a note back through email when they submitted their idea and said, hey, just out of curiosity, why are you submitting this idea online? And the answer from the great majority of people who we sent this to was, because nobody here will listen to me. That's a problem. And that's what I mean when I say we choose to be innovative as a service or as a unit or as a flight or whatever level we're talking about. If we're not willing to listen to your great ideas, if we're not willing to consider everybody's thoughts, even if they turn out to be the wrong idea, if we're not willing to talk through it and make people feel empowered to come forward with suggestions and share their expertise and their opinion and their thoughts, then we're not as good as we could be as an Air Force. We have to change that. I think that's the difference between this. We choose innovation by the way we act, the way we behave, the institution we set up. Sequestration is a bill that's handed to us.
Okay, let's go to Lackland.
Good afternoon, General and Mrs. Welsh. Master Sergeant Garcia here at Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland, Texas. I'm from the 326 Training Squadron. Hoo-yah Bulldogs, for all of you out there. My question is BMT related. Specifically, as you know, the 326 Training Squadron is the launch pad for the new capstone and 8th week transition week program. And we got a lot of excitement around the squadron, around BMT, and a lot of questions. My question in particular is there any plans or talks to build on this foundation in the tech training environment or at first duty stations so that we can start professionally developing airmen after BMT, but before Airman Leadership School?
Yeah, no, is the program you're talking about, just to be clear, I didn't quite hear the phrase you used. Are we talking about the transition program at the end of BMT?
Yes, sir. The 8th-week capstone program.
Yeah. Interestingly, you probably don't know this, but that program started right here. We were trying to figure out how do we get at taking people that come out of BMT and taking all the stuff they learned at the front end in the past and were taught about treating each other with respect. How do you operate in a respectful and dignified environment? How do you value diversity? How do you make sure every airman really matters in every unit? And we realized that people who got that stuff told to them in the first week of BMT, you probably don't retain a whole lot of that at that point in your life. And by the time you finish BMT, you kind of head to tech training as you're suggesting, and you're drifting a little bit, and the focus goes right back to nothing but training. And then it's another couple of months till you show up, depending on the course you're in, at your final unit. And at your final unit, you're then in a dorm or you're downtown in an apartment and you're kind of on your own. And nobody really has this conversation with you. And so we actually started this around the dining room table in the Air House with Betty, inviting in a bunch of people who do this professionally from the Covey Foundation to talk about how do we get at a problem like this. And so the whole discussion started there and has now evolved into this capstone program. So this program actually is really an exciting one for Betty and I. It's exciting for the Air Force because if it works, we can start changing a cultural view from the bottom up. You know, pushing from the top down really is kind of hard to do. But if we can do it from the bottom up, over time, we will just kind of overcome resistance. Here's what the discussion is between General Rand and I about how do you do more than just do this the last week of BMT. The answer is it has to be in tech training. It has to be in Airman Leadership School. It has to be in NCO Academy, Senior NCO Academy. It's got to be in the officer accession programs as well, and in the officer PME programs. It's got to be incorporated into annual discussions led by commanders, supervisors, command chiefs. It's got to be part of everything we do. And so the thought process now is that we're going to stand up an organization called, the name we'll figure out, but it's something like the Profession of Arms Center of Excellence, for example. And it will probably be connected to AATC because AATC affects so many of those different venues I just talked about where that has to be embodied, but it will have a dash line coming directly to me. And so their job will be to make sure we take the things we see in the transition course and make sure that we build the following training and education into all those things I just mentioned, and also start to change the way we have just the conversation in the Air Force about these topics. What does integrity mean if you're a crew chief? How does service before self matter if you're the network operator and administrator at Elmo? How do all these core values and the things we talk about really matter to us? Why do they make a difference? For everything from preventing harassment of people in your workplace to doing your job better on the battlefield. That's the idea. How do we just kind of take all this stuff from heritage to respect, dignity, understanding diversity, all that stuff, and make it just part of our DNA as a service? That's where we're trying to go, but you got it right on the nose. It can't stop after the 8th week of basic training.
Okay, let's go to Yusafa.
Welsh, Mrs. Welsh, and good afternoon from Washington, D.C. I am Airman First Class Gabriel Melendez from 10th Security Forces Squadron, and my question is, in November of 2014, it was announced by Air Force Secretary Deborah Lee James that she hopes to make all jobs in the service open to qualified women in the next year and a half. What are the efforts and plans to make this happen, and what effect will this change have on how the Air Force operates?
Yeah, great question. First of all, the Women in Service Review, all the services are doing it. It's the entire department. The guidance from the Secretary of Defense is we are opening up every career field to women. That's the guidance. And anything that isn't open will be by exception. So the services were directed to go develop gender-neutral standards for jobs that women are currently not accepted into. And then if a current service wants to come back and say, we don't think women should be in this career field, you have to be able to demonstrate that it's because there is a gender-neutral standard that for some reason women shouldn't be allowed to try and meet. In the Air Force, we have a much less of a problem than the other services have, because we only have 7 specialty codes in the Air Force that women cannot compete for now. All of them are connected to special operations units. And because those units operate as teams in the field across service lines and across joint lines, the gender-neutral standards that we're going to measure ourselves against are actually being developed by U.S. Special Operations Command. And so these are career fields like combat controller, battlefield weatherman, PJs. Those are the kind of things that we're talking about. And so it's a very limited number of people, but we're going to look at opening them all up. If the special operations community believes there is some reason they shouldn't be opened up, they're going to have to justify that. It's going to have to be based on a gender-neutral standard, and the discussion will start happening probably approaching the end of this year. So you're going to hear a lot more about this. Our view in the Air Force has been for a long time, as much as we can do with everybody competing, so we put the best horse in the race, for lack of a better analogy, we should be doing. You know, we had a big debate inside the Air Force about putting women into combat cockpits, fighter and bomber cockpits. And it was a big deal to some people. Those of us who were in the fighter community at the time, most of us really didn't care. All anybody cared about was, could a woman fly as well as a man? The answer to that is, oh yeah, not an issue. In fact, physiologically, it turns out women actually can withstand G-forces better than men can. So especially, you know, men like me. And when it comes to who's tougher, who can handle pain better, yeah, there's no competition in my house. So the idea is to make sure that if there's a career field that you can't compete for, that you very clearly understand why, and somebody has explained it in a way that is open, transparent, and has some kind of scientific background to it. Make sense?
Okay, let's go to Effie Warren, sir.
Effie Warren.
Good morning, General. Mrs. Welsh. Second Lieutenant Uresti from the 320th Missile Squadron. General, those of us in the industry know the importance of our mission, but as our nuclear infrastructure ages, and we're about to take on a big price tag to upgrade that infrastructure, what do you foresee as the future of the nuke enterprise, and how do we sell that to the American public?
Yeah, great question. First of all, let me talk about infrastructure in a little broader way. Because I think there's a feeling in our nuclear community that this is the only infrastructure that's falling apart in the Air Force. It's not. As an Air Force for the last 20, 25 years, we have not been able to invest in infrastructure, mission critical infrastructure in lots of areas, not just in the nuclear mission critical infrastructure. And we have not been able to for operational reasons. We have focused on funding the operational stuff we've been involved with since 1990. Because the budgets have been kind of coming down, force structure's been coming down because costs of everything are going up. And so we haven't invested in operational training range infrastructure. The threat arrays at Red Flag, which is kind of our crown jewel, for example, are 1980s era threats. They're not 2015 era threats because that infrastructure investment has declined. We haven't invested in black and white world test infrastructure that benefits not just the Air Force, but the aviation industry in our country. We haven't invested sufficiently in space launch infrastructure. We haven't invested in simulation infrastructure that we really need to transition to being able to operate against future threats and training against them, because we can't afford to build live threats that replicate all that. Technology is changing too fast. And then, of course, we haven't invested sufficiently in the nuclear infrastructure. A lot of the reason for the nuclear infrastructure lack of investment is because there's been this policy debate in the background as to where are we going with nuclear policy. And if there was a new round of START talks coming up, there are people in the government, not in the Air Force necessarily, who were saying, no, we don't want to invest in, sustaining missile fields because maybe we'll get rid of them. And so that was going on in the background, and all that affected this ability to invest in infrastructure. So we are at a point now where we have got to start reinvesting in a persistent and consistent way in all this infrastructure, and comparing it to current mission capability, because that infrastructure creates future capability. And you're going to see it in the nuclear business in a big way, because we have got to invest and recapitalize weapon storage areas, maintenance facilities. We've got to look at how we take launch control centers and adjust them. But to do this, but forget all the weapons things that have to be modified and recapitalized, everything from the ICBM itself to warheads to gravity bombs and tail kits for those bombs, nuclear command control and communications infrastructure, all that needs to be upgraded or built new. And so the first step is going to be start with the steady, persistent investment that we have to make. Weapon storage areas, infrastructure stuff, equipment for people, get the training right, get the manning levels to the right place. And now there is no pushback. That's been the benefit of the pain over the last year. The Department of Defense fully supports this. There is no pushback from the Congress. So we can now put money into accounts that it used to get stripped out of. And we can start making this persistent investment. So that's already started. We put about 150 million at the end of last year in, as you know. We'll put about 500 million in more over the next couple of years, and we'll do the infrastructure investment on weapon storage areas. The plan is built in and funded to start building those next year, and we'll do base by base. Beyond that, we're going to do some developmental planning, which used to be something the Air Force was good at. We kind of walked away from it 10 or 15 years ago. And developmental planning is a way of looking at a mission area in a holistic way. So instead of just saying we got to recapitalize all the nuclear infrastructure just the way it is now, how about going in and looking at, do we really need the launch control centers to be where they are? Is there a way to do that part of the business differently? Is there really cost benefit to keeping the silos because we have them and designing a weapon that fits in the silo, or can you look at designing a new weapon that fits somewhere else that is less expensive to build and maintain over time? We're looking at all that as we move forward with this developmental planning process. Near term, you won't see big changes from this, but 30 years and out, you might. And in this kind of a mission area, we've got to be thinking about investment 30 years out. And that's where we've kind of lost our bubble here lately, and we got to get back on top of it. That makes sense to you, Bud?
Okay.
By the way, last comment. The nation believes in nuclear deterrence and policy. There's debate in the press, but the President, the Congress, the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, the services, we believe that the triad is the right answer for the future. We know that you guys have been the wallpaper of national security ever since the day we started doing this mission. And so there is no debate going on right now in Washington other than in think tanks and in the press as to what the debate will continue over time, but right now there's a clear commitment to this function. And as long as we have the mission assigned to us, we need to invest in the mission and do it right. And we got to make sure that you're fully trained, educated, equipped, and prepared to do that job, and you have the right number of people there to help you. That's where the Secretary's got us focused, and we'll stay on that track, I promise you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Elmendorf, you're up.
Good morning, General and Mrs. Welsh. My name is Annie Ranikowski. I'm one of the spouses here at J-Bear. One of the questions that is concerning many of the families here at J-Bear is the drop in COLA. Sadly, because of the drop in COLA, we've seen a huge increase in the number of families using the food pantries, which has been depleting the supplies there. A lot of the questions are, who is getting these surveys? What company is conducting the survey and the results? And also, is there going to be another survey done within the next 3 years, or do we have to wait another 3 years before it's reviewed again?
Yeah. And I'm not familiar with the COLA survey at Elmendorf specifically, but we can get you answers to all. And if you'll just send me a note, I'll forward it with your email address to Major Marie Hartley. She's sitting right over here. She's excited about being here. And she's going to get the answers to these questions and get them back to you, okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I can understand your concern, and we have had problems with survey participation, because if we don't get a real representative set of people participating in these COLA surveys, you tend to get people who are either really happy or really upset, and you don't get everybody in the middle who really sets the standard. But I don't know specifically if that's been a problem in your region or not. But let us find out, and we'll get back to you. Marie, did you get those? Okay, great. Betty, any thoughts you have on that one?
No, I'm not familiar with the surveys. Are they individual surveys? Are they surveys that are being done at your base asking about COLA and how, what the housing allowances are and everything? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's not.
It's a survey that's being sent out Air Force wide.
Okay.
And it's just a question of how is that the families that are receiving these surveys, how are they being selected? or
Yeah.
is it just a random situation?
Yeah, because it's an Air Force survey, but it goes to people everywhere,
Right.
so we can measure in different regions, so we can adjust. I believe this is actually a legislatively directed process, so we constantly adjust the COLA amounts. But if people don't respond from a particular region, then there's a factor that's kind of an average that gets loaded in that doesn't fairly consider the cost of food, the cost of rent, the cost of all the things that COLA helps cover in your child care or whatever. If it's not fully informed, then your region can be undervalued for COLA or overvalued. It can go either way.
Yeah, let's look into that, Andrew, and we'll get an answer back to you.
We'll have them bring all the answers to Betty, and then she can do the first look that you would probably give it, and then forward it on to you. Does that sound fair?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that concern.
How you need again? Hey, again.
Oh, yay! Hi, General. Hi, Mrs. Welsh. It's June Lamb. I'm one of the command-sponsored family spouses here, and it was great to see you last month. I was so excited to get to meet with you. My question, and with Andy, she's also a command-sponsored spouse here. Our question is, what's the overall goal, if you will, for the command-sponsored program here? And what, as families, can we do to help improve the program?
Yeah, great question. Selfless question, too. Strategically, if I can try and go up to a really big level above the Air Force, the goal is to strengthen the relationship with the country of Qatar and the Middle Eastern region. When we put military folks in another country, and it's just military folks who are there, not their families, there's a very different feel from the host nation's perspective of the relationship with their country. They think we're there to do something from their space. When we put families there, there is a sense of permanence to the relationship. There's a sense of trust that develops. There's a belief that we are really there as partners and not just somebody using a piece of sand to put a runway on. And so the host nations really value the strength of the relationship that is added when we bring dependence into a place. And as a result, they tend to work very hard, as they have in Qatar, to work on guaranteeing security, access to goods and products and services that we're used to in other parts of the world that might not be in that part of the world. You see little examples of this all the time, things like the beach parties. That doesn't happen everywhere. And one of the reasons that happens is because the Sheikh wants to make sure that people really understand how excited they are to have U.S. families there. I mean, that's a big part of why he does those things. Because that relationship, the importance of family, in that part of the world is the same as it is here. They just show it differently, and it's not always as visible to us if our families aren't there. I'll give you an example. Betty and I, on that same trip, after we left you, we went to Saudi. And while we were in Saudi, we went to the dinner at a home of a very senior Saudi government official. I won't tell you who it was, but when we arrived, we were both surprised that the men and women stayed together. His wife, his daughters, his grandchildren were there. It was a family gathering, and we were welcomed into that as a couple. That doesn't happen in that part of the world unless there's a feeling that the relationship is very strong. As part of our discussions with that particular senior leader, he said, I hate to see your airmen here in our country without their families. Is there a way we can start bringing families with them in this country as well? Because he wants that community to get stronger again. And so I'll tell you, there is a real plus to us diplomatically between the U.S. and the host countries by doing this. There's hardships on the families. There's benefits to our service members, because I guarantee you, your spouses love having you there. As do the spouses around you, even the ones whose spouses didn't come with them or couldn't come with them. It changes the feel of an organization. I think it strengthens the fabric of the Air Force unit. I think it gives us some grounding that we don't have when we're all off in uniform on our own doing stupid stuff. We just miss a little bit of that anchor that home brings. And for the two of you sitting in the room there, you know how important it is to your spouse what you provide to them in their service. But the service gets that same thing on a broad scale from our families as a whole. This is the most important thing in my life is not the United States Air Force. I love it. I love you guys. but the most important thing in my life is sitting right here.
Doesn't make me cry.
And I'm just better when she's around. And so I think this is something that we got to look at. We can't overdo it because we can make it very hard on families by trying to overdo it. But where it's possible, I think we should pursue it. Does that make sense, Shane?
And answer the second question, I was just going to say, I think that what you can do is you can continue to give us feedback. I had some great sessions while I was there, and I really appreciated how upfront and all the information that you gave me to bring back to DC and the areas that we need to work on. And we'd like you to continue that. I know some people are afraid that we'll see it as complaining, but we're not. We really want to know how things are going and what we can do to make your life better. And we just really appreciate so many of you have been active getting out into the community, interacting with the host nation. I think that's really important. I think that they enjoy having you there, and I think that they like that you are getting out and about and enjoying their culture. So thank you for doing that and everything that you're doing, because you really all have kind of been the groundbreakers on all of this, and we hope to continue and to grow it.
Okay, Ramstein, you're up.
Hi, General. My name is Senior Evan Meyer from the 721st Aerial Support Squadron. My question is for you and Mrs. Welsh. You've obviously got a lot on your plate. My husband and I are mill-to-mill in one of the Air Force's largest ports. What practical ways are you and Mrs. Welsh balancing family and career, and how would you encourage us to do the same?
You know, that was you broke up a little bit, Sarah. I didn't quite hear it. Can we try that one more time? If you talk a little slower, maybe it'll help.
The end part, I think.
Yeah.
What do we?
It's not you. It's something's breaking down a little bit.
Yeah, it's here. Sorry.
The microphone.
Okay, I'll pause. My husband and I are mill-to-mill in one of the Air Force's largest ports. What practical ways are you and Mrs. Welsh balancing family and career, and how would you encourage us to do the same?
Great question.
Great question.
It's really a hard one, so I'll let Betty start.
I would say lots of communication. Throughout Mark's career, there's been times when I've worked full-time and times when I've been a full-time mom. We have 4 children, and I think I've done it a little bit of every way. But the big thing that I have found that has helped Mark and I is communication. Talking, making sure that we're always on the same page. Mark is really good, no matter how tired he is. He gets home at the end of the day. He always makes time to sit down and talk with me. I do the same. And, you know, there's times when you just don't want to discuss something, or you're just tired and you just want time alone. But I think just overall communication between you and your spouse, and so that you both understand where you're coming from, where you want to go, and what your overall plan is. It's just key. I think that that's one of the most important things that you can do, is be a good communicator with each other.
You know, one of the things that is a bit of danger, because you guys work hard, and especially spouses work hard, whether you're at home taking care of kids or you're in the Air Force doing a different job. But you work hard, you get distracted by different things, and you both get tired. It's just kind of the way life is. And what happens is you start to get frustrated with things, and then you start to get frustrated with each other, and you devalue or you forget the value that your partner brings to your life. And so anything you can do to take a time out from all that other stuff, even if it's getting somebody to watch the kids and have a date night, it's if you don't have kids, then take time and just one night a week go out somewhere, or one night a month go out somewhere. Even if it's just and once a week go for a walk, walk the dog, and make it an effort to do that for 30 minutes, 3 times a week together, so you can just have space where it's just the 2 of you. What we have found over time is if we're able to do that, I kind of keep in mind all the time how cool Betty is. And I don't put her in context of the latest issue or the latest problem with the kids or the latest frustration at work or the next move that we're stressed about. I just remember kind of how neat she is and how she notices the cool things when we walk and how much she likes the dog. I mean, it's silly stuff that caused you to fall in love in the first place. And if you start to lose that understanding and that memory and that value, it starts to really stress the relationship. And so I don't think it's big stuff. I think it's little stuff. I mean, I look at my wife and go, God, she's gorgeous. I mean, sometimes that's just the reconnection. And other times I look at her and go, God, she's just tough. Or she's mean, or she's whatever she is that day. But it's important to keep looking at each other and understand the things that your spouse brings, your partner brings, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your friend brings, whoever it is that you value in your life. What do they bring that makes your life better? And you can do that in 30 seconds a day, but you got to remember to do it. You go too long without doing it, pretty soon you start thinking, why do I need them? And the reality is, you needed them before, you probably still do. But you got to value it or they get frustrated. Makes sense? Not great advice. We're not good counselors. You just got to work at it.
Okay, Lachlan, you're up.
Hello, General Welsh. Mrs. Welsh. I'm Technical Sergeant Meredith Healy. I'm an airman musician at the Band of the West here at Lackland. Last month, I attended the new Non-Commissioned Officers Academy Intermediate Leadership Experience down at Keesler. It was an awesome experience where I continued to be impressed by not only the technical expertise, but the educational successes of my fellow enlisted airmen. By this spring, we all will have said goodbye to several thousand members of our Air Force family. And my question is, beyond the assurance of no involuntary separations in fiscal year 2015, how do you plan to retain this incredibly high quality force?
Yeah, that may be fundamentally the most important question for me in the time I'm in this job. Because with all this stuff changing around everybody's really proud of who they are and what they do, but they're frustrated because they don't know what they're going to be doing. They're frustrated they don't know what the money's going to look like. They're frustrated that this might affect them, their family, whatever. And it's hard to get answers right now because of all this uncertainty. We can screw up a lot of things in the Air Force and be just fine. We screw up our people, we're done. We can not buy new equipment. We can downsize if we had to. We could cut money here and there. But if we lose the trust, the confidence, and the pride of our airmen, we're out of business. So for me, the Air Force has always been a bottom-up industry. Our airmen have to be proud of who they are, what they do, and the people they stand beside. They have to be able to, they have to believe that we're going to train them, educate them, and give them the tools they need to be the best in the world at whatever it is they do. And you're in the middle of that effort, by the way, in what you're doing now. They have to be inspired to serve, and clearly our band is in the middle of that because you capture the spirit of our Air Force. You capture its soul. But our airmen have to feel all those things or they're not going to want to hang around, and they're good enough they all have other options. So the things that make people feel that way, education, training, professional development, all those things we have to fund. You can't cut those things just because your budget goes down. Those are the foundational things that you must keep investing in human capital infrastructure, if you want to look at it that way. Just as important as nuclear infrastructure or anything else, in fact, maybe more important. So we're prioritizing resources against those things. We're not going to cut PME. We're not going to cut education and training. We're not going to cut tuition assistance. That is not the way to save money for our Air Force. It's relatively small money compared to the things we buy, and it's just maybe penny wise, but it's pound foolish in terms of a long-term approach. So focus of investment needs to stay on airmen. So that's the way we're going to try and go about doing this, and I'm going to ask for all of your help, because the other thing that I talked about with this Profession of Arms Center of our Excellence is we've kind of lost touch a little bit with who we are as a service and why we've been so successful over time and how impressive what you do really is. You have no idea how cool you are. You're not that kind of people. You don't acknowledge that. I see it. Betty sees it. We're awed every day. Everywhere we go, we just walk away going, this is just unbelievable how cool everybody is first, but how talented they are, how capable they are, how much they care. And we cannot afford to lose that as a service. It starts at the supervisor level, guys. It doesn't start at the chief of staff level. I'll work the resource side, but this is every senior airman supervisor, every staff sergeant supervisor, every chief, every commander at every level has got to be focused on this We got to know our people better. We got to make our people understand how critically important they are to what we do, and we got to do it all day, every day. If we do that, they'll take care of the job. You guys can do anything. We just got to make sure you want to stay and do it with us.
Yusafa, you're up.
Good morning, General and Mrs. Welsh. I'm Lieutenant Smith from the 10th Mission Support Group here at the Academy.
Thank you.
With 4 stages: expectations and inspiration, instruction, feedback, and timely reflection. I feel it's easy to dismiss reflection with our busy schedules, life, etc., though this stage is critical for both personally and as teams.
I'm sorry. Would you mind speaking a little slower again? We're getting that feedback again. I think it's just the rate that you're talking. It's just getting blurred at this end.
Sure. The cadets have a general leadership growth model with 4 stages: expectations and inspiration, instruction, feedback, and finally reflection. It's easy to dismiss reflection with our busy schedules, life, etc., though it's a critical stage for growth personally and for our team, family, friends. How do you find time for reflection as a leader and with your spouse or with Mrs. Welsh and as a family?
Yeah, well, for me, you're assuming IQ that can understand myself when I reflect, which may be a dangerous assumption. Now, let Betty talk about this, because this is important from both a family member and a military member side. So how do you find time for reflection on what service means as a Air Force spouse?
I think it's probably finding time, quiet time, and time for reflection is been one of the hardest things over the last 2.5 years. I think both Mark and I had to work really hard at that. As far as being an Air Force spouse, I'm really proud to be an Air Force spouse. I'm really proud and honored to be with Mark in his position.
I told you, you'd love her.
But, for me, I think about it often it's just an honor and privilege to be able to do what I do and to be a part of this great Air Force with everybody. I often think about where we're at and how short-lived this is. And I think that helps in my reflection. I try and start every day by counting my blessings and feeling that I know that this is a privilege to be able to do this, and an honor to be an Air Force spouse, to be the Chief of Staff of the Air Force's spouse, and just to be a part of this great organization. When we travel and I get to visit with all of you, it's amazing. I enjoy every minute of it, getting to know each and every one of you, and I try and take time every day to reflect on that, because we won't always have this. We'll always have all of you, we'll always have a great Air Force, but we won't always have this opportunity, and I won't always have this chance to be in this position. So,
the hardest thing, as you suggest, is finding time to think about anything, because we're going 1,000 miles an hour. And so the one thing that and I'll tell you, I've been frustrated organizationally by this, because there are people on the staff here who I need to be sitting and thinking with, and we don't ever see each other. And so part of our effort on the air staff to reorganize our strategic process, the planning process, the decision process we use for everything is based purely on that. How do we build a process where we're forced to go sit down and talk to each other for a whole day about strategic things before we make decisions about money? And so we're working this at the corporate level, the big Air Force level, pretty hard. Personally, I found that I have to find specific times, even if they're really short, and I found that even 3 minutes walking down a hall is a good thing. Sometimes 30 seconds walking into my office and stopping and thinking, okay, what's next and why is it important, is reflection. Back over my shoulder here is the Duke. The Duke's been with me for a long, long time. And he sits in the corner of my office everywhere I've worked for, 20-some years. And he sits in my office in the Pentagon now. He stands there up in the corner, keeping an eye on me. But when I walk into my office door, everywhere I go in terms of offices, I put the Duke where when I walk in, I'm looking at him. Because he reminds me that I'm supposed to stand for something. I don't know what you think about John Wayne, it doesn't matter. But he reminds me I'm supposed to stand for something. And to me, just that 5 seconds of reflection when I first walk in the door every morning is really helpful before I start my day and try and do my job right. And so I just think you take opportunities where you can create them. A lot of people do this, by the way. A lot of other senior leaders in the Air Force do this at the gym. I have trouble running because I have a bad knee, so I run enough to get by the PT test, basically. But the rest of the time, as I'm not within a couple of months of the PT test, I ride a bike. I ride about an hour and a half a day. That's the time I use to just think and trying to decide what's next. I may be reading something half the time. The rest of the time, I close the book and just think about what's coming up. What should I be thinking? The other thing I do is I do dishes every chance I get. Because naturally, I'm an introvert anyway.
You don't want to do dishes.
But I can't play one at work. And so when I go home, if I go do dishes, nobody bothers me. Not my kids, nobody. And it's time to think. So I think you build it into your style, your personality, your day, and create options from 5 seconds to an hour where you can just reflect on how's it going. If you can get that done, it then feeds those conversations that you have with people on your staff, people at home, with your spouse, about how life's treating you. I mean, it'll just help make your life better. We're not great at it all the time. We struggle with it just like you do. Just keep grinding. Never forget how important it is, though. That's what matters most.
Thank you, General Mrs. Welsh.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, Effie Warren, you're up next.
Hello, my name is Maggie Chator, and I am a spouse. My husband is in the 320th Missile Squadron. And when we PCSed here this past summer, the Key Spouse Program, as well as the Spouses Club on base, were very vital to me fitting in right away and getting involved, and it's been absolutely awesome. And my question for you is, well, more for Mrs. Welsh, but is what visions do you have and would we eventually like to see happen with the Key Spouse Program?
Good question. Well, I would like to see it continue to grow. I think that even though it was started back in 2009 by Susie Schwartz, it was a strong advocate and basically created and started the program, her and Paula Roy. I think we've come a long way. We get frustrated by some of the things that we're still not able to do with it, but you know, it is a young program compared to, we modeled it after the Ombudsman program with the Navy, and that program's been ongoing for 30 years. I would like to see it where each of the squadron commanders, first shirts, and key spouses network together. Every organization buys into it and sees what a strong support and network it can give to our families. As we cut back in services, I think it's even more important because we need to make sure we keep in touch with our military families, the spouses, the children, and make sure that their needs are taken care of. And the key spouse is just a great person to be able to reach out and make sure we're keeping that touch on the families.
You know, Betty, every base we visit, Betty visits with key spouses to make sure that we stay connected to what's going on in the program. Once a year, I send a letter to every wing commander in the Air Force, every group commander and squadron commander about the Key Spouse program. And just as a reminder for the ones who weren't there last year that this is important to me. Because Key Spouse programs work in those places where everyone remembers it's a commander's program, not a spouse's program. The Key Spouses do fantastic work, but if they don't have the access to support and the benefit of communicating routinely with first sergeants and commanders, it's just an impossible job. And so if the commanders are not actively involved, sooner or later I'm going to find out and I'm going to beat them.
My wish is that every squadron everywhere bought into the Key Spouse program, and everybody needs it at a different level. You know, and everybody does it a little bit differently, and that's okay. That's why the Key Spouse program is non-AFI. It's not mandatory, but it is, we'd like people to develop it in the way that works for them. And I think that there is a need at every squadron for some form, shape of a Key Spouse program. And I think our Key Spouses are awesome. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back up to Elmendorf, and this will probably be the last question.
Hello, General Welsh, Mrs. Welsh. My name is Staff Sergeant Frederick Parrish. I'm with the 611th Civil Engineering Squadron. Sir, my question for you is, where do you foresee the Air Force mission given the increased threat of non-state actors within the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, just to make sure I got the question. Was the question of where do I perceive the mission going because of the rise of non-state actors?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I don't think the mission is going to change. We only do 5 things. We're not that complicated. You know, since 1947, we've done air superiority. We added space superiority in with it here lately. But we do air superiority and space superiority. We do ISR, we do mobility, we do strike, and we do command and control. That's it. That's as complicated as we get. And everybody in our Air Force has some role, either directly or indirectly, supporting one of those missionaries. And so I think those missionaries will stay exactly the same over the next 60 years as they have for the last 60. The difference is that we're going to expand activity for those missions into new domains, into space and cyber. So we've already been doing a lot in and through the space domain for those mission areas. We will continue to do more, and we will do much more in, through, and from the cyber domain in each of those areas. The non-state actors basically have created a problem for us in that they have access to military targets, to national targets, through a domain that, in particular the cyber domain, that they have not had access through in the past. And we have not had to worry about defending it or offensively trying to negate them in that domain in the past. And that's where the nation and the military services are now trying to expand operational activity. Our part of that response will be within those 5 core missions that we do. We have airmen in our Air Force who operate in that cyber domain who support other organizations, the NSA, U.S. Cyber Command, under their authorities to take actions in the cyber domain. But that's not Air Force work. It's just great airmen doing it on behalf of somebody else, under someone else's authorities. The other thing that's going to happen with non-state actors is they will, over time, clearly get access to more and better traditional weapons, kinetic weapons, nuclear weapons, all those things that we're concerned about being used against the American public or against our forces overseas. And so we're going to have to realize that the threat looks different than it used to look. If we haven't learned that over the last 15 years, then shame on us. So it won't be easy to identify threats anymore. They're going to hide in urban environments. They're going to hide in populations. And then they will have the same kinetic capability along with this new non-kinetic kind of asymmetric capability that the cyber domain affords them. So we've just got to get better at what we do. But what we do are still those same core mission areas. Make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, bud. Well, listen, guys, we've got to go. We've probably taken up enough of your time already. Do me a favor. If I could get a shot out of, just pick a base. It doesn't matter. If you wouldn't mind, Chris. Okay, I'm looking at IUD. Guys, be honest with me. Don't be subtle. I'd be disappointed here. If forums like this, if this kind of discussion is worthwhile to you, you think, and isn't too much a pain in the butt for you to be pulled out of work to do it, is this something we should continue trying to do? Just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'm not looking at name tags. So just, okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we'll try and continue to figure out more and more ways to communicate with you and encourage all of our other senior leaders to try and do the same. Because one of the things we're really trying to focus on is communication and how do we get, you know, from me and the air staff down through the MAGCOMs to all of you. It's really hard to do in big organizations. We're lucky today because we're being assisted by Google, who's kind of broken the code on a lot of this stuff. They're pretty good at communicating to really large groups of people. And so one more time, I'd like to thank Chris for taking his time to help us do this. And by the way, he's doing lots of other stuff that's helping our United States military through his fellowship here. But it's a pretty cool place. You ever get a chance to visit D.C., get a hold of Chris and come over and take a look. I know he'd love to show it to you. Thank you for everything each of you do for our Air Force, for our nation, and more importantly for each other and for your families. And remember to keep taking care of each other. It's the most important thing we do, guys. We'll take care of the nation just fine. You take care of each other. I'll look forward to seeing you on our next visit. I'll give Betty the last word.
Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. We know how busy all of your schedules are. And it's just been an honor to be here and chat with you, and look forward to doing this again. So you all have a great day, and thank you also for your service. Thank you for your service to the Air Force and to our nation. And the spouses, thank you for coming today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Hey, by the way, find all your commanders and tell them to get their chins in, and then tell them I said hi. Take care of yourselves.